Hero bans are starting to become a pretty contentious topic of discussion in the Overwatch community, and I wanted to talk about what I think is good about them, what is a problem with implementing them in the game, or maybe do they even have to come to the live game as a whole. I'll go ahead and give you a disclaimer. I definitely think that competitive Overwatch should continue to use hero bans. They've started doing it in the World Cup, which I haven't covered on this channel because I've kind of been avoiding it. I don't really, like what's been going on with that. But I think the positive reception to it has led a lot of people, especially pros, to be very warm to this idea of it sticking around. And then that kind of begs the question, is this something that we would want to bring to the live game? Alec Dawson and Aaron Keller talked about this on the Group Up podcast just the other day. And I think that out of many of the changes that are potentially coming to Overwatch, at least trial, this is one that I am the most intrigued about. Because for a long time, you may have seen my TikTok about this. I've been pretty anti-hero ban. A lot of those, classic, we don't have enough heroes. You could potentially ban characters that they're like the only character that does that one thing. And then you've eliminated strategies off the, complete strategies off the board, stuff like that. And as time has gone on, and I've played games with hero bans before, but I just recently played Marvel Rivals, and they also had a hero ban system in the tournament, and it was a lot of fun, and it's different in the tournament setting because you all know each other and you're all discussing it. But it really was eye-opening about how we could kind of make the game more fun for ourselves if we banned stuff that we just thought was unfun to play against, and that made a really good time for everybody. And I think at the end of the day, we really do want to focus on having a good time, right? We want people playing the game and having fun playing the game. So maybe sacrificing something here or there just so we are on average having more fun, that is definitely not a bad thing. And we will talk about some of the sacrifices you would have to make, or really how the game would change by adding this kind of system to the game. But first, what I want to talk about are the two systems that really inspired this video and sparked the conversation around it. So first, let's talk about the World Cup system of hero bans. Basically, each team got a ban per game. And remember that this is competitive, and it works a lot different. It's not game by game. It's over a whole match. So basically, over the course of your series, each character can only be banned by each team one time, and that in every game, only one of each role can be banned, right? So you could ban, your team could ban Pharah, right? And now the other team can no longer ban a DPS. They have to ban either a support or a tank. And that is how it was, right? But then later on, your team could never, ever ban Pharah again, right? You had to be very strategic of how you picked it. Also, you have to know is that those teams, they didn't have access to the roster. Like, they picked the roster and the subs after the bans came in. So you couldn't just target people or do anything like that. What this made was not only very strategic decisions with the bans and trying to metagame it in that way, which I think is honestly really cool. It just brings a lot of variety to the game. Just because every strategy, certain characters enable certain strategies, and when you remove those characters, then either that strategy gets weaker or you have to kind of pivot and try to figure out what to do. Now, these bans applied to either side, so if you banned Pharah and the other team banned Mercy, sure. Neither team could play either of those characters, right? Until the next game, if they weren't banned, right? That's pretty important to know, because it basically just meant that there were two bans. I feel like my camera is changing its hue. What is going on? Okay, anyways, sorry if that's distracting you in the video. I don't really understand. What are we doing? Okay. Anyways, yeah, so basically, this was a really interesting system, and I want to see this later more. But also, I just played in the Marvel Rivals tournament, where they had an individual game system where you would, one team would ban one character, we go to the next team, they'd ban one and protect a character, then you go back to your team, you'd protect one and ban one, and then finally the final ban would go to the last team. So 4 characters got banned, and 2 characters got completely protected. And that adds a little bit of strategy of trying to figure out, like, who are we going to, who are we going to ban now that we know these characters are going to be in the game, or at least guaranteed to be on the table and stuff like that. It's really interesting. It's a lot of fun. I don't want to focus on that too much. I want to focus on, are hero bans something that are suited for ranked Overwatch, right? We will leave quick play out of this. I feel like quick play doesn't need this kind of system. You can play whatever you want in quick play. And in fact, I think the idea, the strive for like a more casual game mode would be kind of more needed with this kind of system in what's it called, in Overwatch, because if you have the super competitive where you're not necessarily going to be able to play all the characters you want to play, then you have the quick play where it's going to be more likely you'll be able to play everything you want to play, so you can still try hard and do all that stuff. And then you have the less casual where it doesn't really, anything's off the table, right? I feel like that might be a good thing for the game if they can try and figure something out like that. But before I go into the actual pros and cons of if the system was implemented, I did want to talk about some of these. I got a lot of comments on my Hero Bands TikTok about why this wouldn't work, right? It's not necessarily like this is a con, like this is a trade-off. I'm saying more of like, some people don't think this would fundamentally work in Overwatch because of these problems. Let's talk about counter swapping. There are 2 arguments that I saw about counter swapping. One is that counter swapping is too ingrained into the game that you cannot disrupt that at all. It is counter swap meta. It is too much in the game that if you disrupt it at all, that is basically it. The other one about counter swapping is just like, what happens if you eliminate all of the counters to a character and now they're going to reign free, right? Those were the two. Basically, they're kind of the same sizes, or 2 sides of the same coin. In my opinion, I think that hero bans actually solve part of the counter swapping issue. The problem with counter swapping is that you get insane inherent value out of just swapping to another character, right? We think about our Roadhogs or Maugas, like especially in tanks, right? It's so easy just to swap to one of those characters and completely disrupt the cycle. And making, like, now you have to get countered yourself and continue, right? It's so easy, those hard counters. What happens if you remove a piece of the puzzle, right? What happens if you remove the Mauga and the Roadhog? Well, now you don't have a hard counter for Winston, but you still have some characters that do better against him and some that do worse against him, right? So now it is much more skillful that you have to play around Winston's strengths and weaknesses without just picking the character that completely exploits them that hard. That, to me, is much more interesting than just counter swapping. In fact, when people say that this would never work because counter swapping is so strong, to me that just screams that they frankly don't really understand how to play the game or how to play against certain characters. They just know what characters are better against others. They don't see the minor weaknesses, they only see the major ones, right? Every character has weaknesses. There's always counterplay. But, it's easier just to click Roadhog into Winston rather than trying to figure out how to play into Winston on Reinhardt or Ramattra or something like that. So to me, the counter swapping this is actually like a good thing. Like, I think that this actually helps the counter swapping problem with a ban system. Also, in the same breath, the one where it's like, well, now there's no counters for Pharah, so what do we do? Right? She's just going to wreak havoc. It's going to be no fun. That's where I think protect systems really come into play. Seeing that a character gets banned and then making sure that another character that does a similar job to them gets protected, or you just are able to respond and ban the character that would do really well into that, right? A lot of times with these kind of like ban systems that go back and forth, you have to react to what's getting banned or protected or anything like that. So if you see 2 hit scans get banned and you're concerned about Pharah, perhaps you should ban Pharah, right? Stuff like that. Or if you see like Pharah gets saved, a hit scan get banned, why not you protect the other hit scan if that's what you think? There's other ways to play around Pharah, but that's kind of the example, right? To me, not bad. There's ways around it, right? The small roster is the classic one. People say the roster is too small for hero bands. Guys, there don't have to be like 7 hero bands. There can be like 2. That's not that bad. 38 out of 40? Guess what? We were playing with 38 heroes half a year ago, basically. Maybe like 8 months ago. It's okay. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, I think really more the problem is that like there are some heroes that don't have much of a contemporary. Like, this is pre-Juno. Lucio doesn't have a speed boost character, right? So if you banned Lucio, now that a lot of that is off the table. Now the other team can't play Lucio, so that strategy's gone too. But now that, you know, Juno is kind of does his job, and, you know, Kiriko can help with dives more than Ana can, right? Or like Ana can. So if Ana was, you know, banned, then you can play Kiriko instead, and it'd be like, okay, it's a different flavor of dive, but still, it's kind of that idea, right? That you don't necessarily need any one specific hero to make any comp work. It's just going to work a little differently, right? It's going to have little different pieces that make it function. The game is less dynamic. There's less options when you ban heroes. I actually don't think this is necessarily true. When you ban heroes, now it's really like if you were to ban the heroes that have no contemporaries, which again, I really don't think that it's really like that anymore. Now that Lucio has somebody that complements him, or does something very similar to what he does, now I think it's on the table, right? What I think this actually does is that now if there's a character that is so overbearingly good that you have to play them or they take over lobbies, you can get rid of them and in fact open the options back up and make it more dynamic because there's just more things that you can play. I think that's a much better argument than just like, oh, it makes the game less dynamic. I really don't think that's the case. Here's a funny one. Just adapt forehead. That's not really what this is about, right? In fact, you can adapt either way, right? But it's really more about fun, right? Like the idea of hero bands is that like that is all you're going to be doing with hero bands, that you're going to be adapting on the fly all the time, trying to figure out what to play, how to play against it, how to play with your team when you don't have certain options on the table, right? That's all adaptation. That's all variety. So yes, you could just say like, just adapt to this character that you don't like, but you know, how much can I, you know, when Pharah has a 60% win rate, how much can I adapt against her? You know, at what point is she just too powerful that it doesn't really matter, right? Like the adaptations I make are just not as fun, right? You can adapt, but they just aren't as fun and the game just isn't that good, right? That's really more the thing, right? I want to stress that like the hero bands thing, this is for fun. This is in fact trying to make the game more fun and more enjoyable overall, right? On average, basically. Getting rid of the problem characters, because there are plenty of problem characters, reducing the amount of them, that's a good idea, I think. But yeah, so let's go ahead. I want to talk about the pros of a hero band system, right? Variety. Variety is the big thing, right? It's like, oh, I play Ramattra a lot, or, you know, there's like a meta where it's like there's a hard meta. Let's just get rid of the hard meta. Let's get rid of the characters that enable the hard meta. Now we're playing differently. Now the comps play different. Now the characters play different. Then I go in the next game, completely different set of bands. Now we're playing the game differently. You know, like it even talks about the maps, right? So like, let's go into a map and let's say Widow got banned and Hanzo got banned and Sigma got banned. And now it's like, whoa, how do we even play this map anymore? Now this map has completely changed. That my understanding, I thought this map is completely broken wide open. Now I have to use other parts of the map I wouldn't typically use. I can use other strategies, stuff like that. That's fun. That's cool. It's interesting. Same thing for dive maps, right? What if Winston is gone? What if Ana is gone? You know, what if Kiri is gone? All that stuff. It's like, whoa, now we can do some other stuff. Maybe that alleviates. You can actually alleviate frustrations with map design with hero bands as well. I think that's really, really good for the game. Again, variety. No two games are going to play the same. And, you know, Overwatch had, as they say, kind of has a sameness problem. Getting rid of a couple characters every game, that could totally help with it, right? All right. A ban system also gives the devs really good resources about how to determine when characters are a problem, right? It's like this character gets banned a lot on this map. That means they might be too good or the map might favor them too much, right? This character gets banned way more often than many other characters, right? Or like this character gets banned a lot when this other character gets banned, or this character gets banned a lot when this other character gets protected, right? So maybe that is like something that's perceived to be too much. It's really good to know, like, you know, just in general, when there's no outlying factors, it's like, okay, so Roadhog just gets banned a lot, right? Nobody wants to play against Roadhog. He's just on fun. That can recognize it's like, oh, it really is that much of a problem of Roadhog. And maybe there's some other underlying things, like Sombra isn't particularly good right now, but a lot of my TikTok comments were about Sombra. About Sombra will be perma-banned. They hate Sombra all the time, right? That is something that maybe the devs could find. Maybe they don't see that as vocally, but in the data, they will see it that way. So that's really good for that. It is more fun. I talked about this earlier. It's just more fun. It's more fun to play when the frustrating and dumb heroes are gone, right? The overpowered ones, the ones that just completely hard counter other characters to where it's the point where you just have to swap, right? The inherent value from the swap. It's just more fun to play when you don't have to worry about those super frustrating characters. I hate Widow. If I could get rid of Widow and her good maps, hallelujah, praise the Lord, right? Now, of course, you never know who's going to get banned. We're going to talk about that later, about how the systems would work. But that sounds like a very enticing offer, basically. Player agency. This is something they've been talking about earlier in the dev update. This is player agency that doesn't disrupt the flow of the game, right? It's just limiting. It's just some heroes are gone, right? That's kind of it. The moment-to-moment gameplay is exactly the same. There are no pickable passives. There's no anything like that. It's really, you get to have an influence on the game about how the game is going to play, like more so than normal, right? You get to kind of like, the game is going to play a little differently because these are the things that we picked and we got rid of. I think that is a good compromise for the player agency about how each individual map is going to play out. I think that's a really cool idea, and I think that's a good way to give it back to the player. And I talked about counter swapping, that this breaks the counter swapping cycle, so that counter swapping is not necessarily a tactic that is on the board, if the bans are correct. Hold on, let me make sure I didn't freeze, because on my end here, I did. I think I'm good. Okay, anyways, so with those are the pros, right? Overall, I think it's just make the game more fun, more varied, all of that. What are the cons, right? Let's talk about one tricks. One tricks exist, and if somebody's one trick is taken out, that is unfun for them. It just is, right? If their one trick is banned and now they can't play it, then that sucks, right? Two arguments for that. It's comp, right? There are other modes that you can play to play your one trick, sure, whatever. I don't think that's a great argument, but that is something. I think the other one is that Overwatch is trying to figure, they like to make big changes to how the game plays, the game feels. Not being able to one trick, or like being forced to be more versatile, is something that Overwatch hasn't really encouraged so much. They want you to play whatever, right? They want you to play however you want. But at some point, is there a world where it is a greater good to have this kind of system and then slightly discourage one-tricking more and more, and encourage your players to branch out more? I know initially I think one-tricking or one-tricks will be very upset about that, because for a very long time, this has been perfectly viable. There's nothing stopping them from doing this. But I don't think it's ever too late to redefine what is valued in the game that you play. And I definitely value versatility, variety, much more than I think many people do. I play every role. I'm basically the same rank on every role. I like to play a lot of stuff. Just because I like all the characters. I think they're all, I like all the characters to an extent, right? Like I just I think it's a good game overall. I don't like one character per se. I like the game of Overwatch. And I don't think it's ever too late to redefine what the game can be or what it should play like. So, yes, I think there will be growing pains. It would be harder for One Tricks to adapt. But is there a world where we lean less away from One Tricks and maybe like a couple tricks, right? You have a couple of characters that you can play. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And we're going to talk about some solutions later that are going to kind of minimize, not having any characters to play, right? Because I think there's no one good solution for all of these problems in the system that we come up with. But I have a couple of ideas that can really help minimize it. But TLDR, I think there is a world where one tricking is not so enabled, right? And I don't think that is necessarily a bad thing, so long as very often, and there are other ways that people can play those characters that they want to be playing. All right, another con. Feeling like you don't have a character to play. I'm going to talk about that later. People may troll if they don't get what they want. Now, people can always troll, but that is something where it's like, if somebody gets banned and then somebody just kind of takes takes the game hostage, that's kind of a weird problem, because that could happen that could happen hero bans or not. How do you stop that? And if that is a more of a problem with hero bans, what do you do at that point, right? Like, how would you prevent that? And again, I think that's just like, you have to have a ban system that is not so restrictive, and we'll talk about that. Bans can be used to target players on your team. Now, I think there's going to be some things that can limit this, but it can be, if you know that somebody plays some things, you just want to like mess with them, you could ban all the heroes that they play. That is a problem in a possible system of the game, and we really don't want that. We don't want people using that system to harass or make anyone else. Again, the system is here for people to have more fun, and we really don't want people to feel like they can't play the game, or that they feel actively antagonized when they play the game. So we want to consider that too. And really, how would it work? How would you implement it, right? So that's what I wanted to talk about here. This is that last segment of the video. How do we implement the ban system? And I think there's a lot of ways you can go about this. I have one that I think is pretty good, but not great. Or not great. It doesn't cover everything, right? And I would like a lot of feedback on this, because I've seen a lot of other systems that I actually like, the way that it's here, but I wanted to really focus on a lot of these pain points from the cons. So really, for most people, right? For the worst case scenario, how do we minimize the worst case scenario as much as possible? Because if I just, play with my 5-stack of friends, I could just have any kind of way to do the ban system that's just like pretty competent, and it would be fine. But we want to make it like the best possible thing. So what do we want? We don't want targeting, and how we can get around this is that we can make it so that you cannot see profiles before you ban. Basically, you don't know who's even on your team before you ban. Basically, you just kind of blind ban based on the map, right? Because it is ranked, and you never know what anyone's ever going to play anyways. So it's not, it's not really any inherent it's no inherent advantage to try and ban something that somebody else would play. Because when I just run into Joe Schmo, I don't know if he's a Genji one trick or anything until I get into the game. We also want to we want to make it around the map, because you don't want to waste bans just because. I don't really like Widow, right? But like, there's maps where she'll never work, right? She'll really never work. And you don't want to just ban Widow or try to ban Widow off rip every time, because like, what if you go in and it's Oasis and you're like, well, shit, right? Now we wasted a ban and it's not going to do anything really for the game. So we want to make sure it's around, we know about the map. I think it should be blind. You don't know what anyone else on your team is banning. You don't know any, again, I talked about this. You don't know who's even on your team, what they play, stuff like that. You don't know what the enemy is banning either. It's really hard to determine who gets to go first or second, and I think that a ranked system can't have a ban system where it just randomly picks a team to go first and like ping pong back and forth. I kind of think that the bans need to happen all at once, and then you'll kind of see at the end what the results are, regardless of how that works, right? The way I have it is like it could be by team or it could be by lobby. So basically, like you as a team figure out bans that you want, and the other team, they figure out bans that they want, and you guys come together and you share those bans, right? Or everyone in the lobby decides on the bans together, right? So instead of it being of a pool of 5 and 5, it's just a pool of 10 trying to figure out what the bans should be. Also, you have to think about roles, right? When you ban a character, how many per role? Is it unlimited? It's just like how many bans total, right? Does it matter what roles they are? Do they have to have a limit? Maybe it's like only up to 2 per role, stuff like that. There's a lot of weird stuff you can go with. You don't want to have too many bans, or else you're going to eliminate too many people. But if you don't have enough bans, then it's going to feel like there isn't enough gone, that it really isn't going to make as much of an impact overall. It's a weird balance, a real weird line to cross there. And then a protect system. Would you want a protect system? And in fact, I think protect systems work for team to team, like back and forth ping ponging. But I think it's a lot harder when it's all together as one big lobby. So the solution I'm proposing is one that is a little more unique than other places I've seen. I want to talk about. I'm gonna lean into that idea of the lobby bans characters. You all agree on the characters to ban here. So, I'm gonna say that the entire lobby is gonna vote to ban one character per role. So basically, you get a vote about I'm gonna ban 1, 2, 3, one tank, one DPS, one support, and then everybody else does that. So up to 10 people, right? This means that basically you do like whoever has the most votes gets banned. If there's a tie, it just 50-50s between the tie, or however many get tied. But if you have 10 people all trying to ban one per role, then that is drastically going to reduce the amount of ties that are going to happen, right? So if you leave the game open and 10 people just try and ban, however many characters, it's very often that people are just going to there's going to be a lot of 1s, there's going to be a lot of 0s, and probably just like a couple of 2s, and then you kind of have to randomly pick between them. Or if you have it like the 5 of you ban 1 tank, 1 support, 1 DPS, then that's so often where you might even just have a split of like 1-1-1-1-1. Or 2-2-1 or something like that. It's so often where you're not going to get like a definitive answer. When you add more people to the pool, it's gonna happen more often, right? Also, you got to remember that like tanks only have 12, supports only have 10, Juno's about to make 11, DPS have like 18, which is a lot, but it's a lot better than the 5 of you trying to figure out what of the 18 DPS characters. That's very off. That could happen where you have like a 20 like. Everyone picks one different one, and then it has to roll a 20% about which one actually gets banned. That's not player agency, right? That is just completely random. So when you add more, and also like when you have it by roll, it limits however many, right? So you don't just have the whole 40 to choose from. You have what's it called? You have 10 or 12 or something like that. I feel like that's much more. It's going to be more accurate more often, right? This reduces ties drastically. It also doesn't favor one side or the other, because you are in ranked and there's nobody knows like who's the higher seed or who lost last game. That's not how it works, right? It's not even like a thing to consider. So don't give anyone favor. Again, just let it all as the lobby, right? There's no advantage either way. Nobody even knows who's on whose team yet. Basically, you don't even know who they are. Just all anonymously banned for the map. And maybe you can see like the total number of bans, but you can't see who's done it or anything like that. That I think makes it a lot more integral. It's just more of like a town square. Like, this is just what I think we should go away, rather than like super duper targeted. Again, for ranked, this is just for fun on average. So people are less inclined to like super counter swap and have like a really big strategy, especially if they don't know anything about the players. It's just more about like, I don't want to fight Widow on circuit. I don't want to fight Tracer on any map. She's really good on any map. I don't want to fight Mauga. Stuff like that, right? I think that's kind of what we should be aiming for. And again, like, yeah, everyone comes to consensus rather than teams competing with each other. Ties go to the random of the most voted, which, again, it should limit the ties drastically. That means that there's only 3 characters removed, which I don't think is that many, right? It doesn't have a protect system, but I don't really think it needs one, just because you aren't trying to metagame around anybody else, right? You don't know what the other team is doing. You don't know what your team is doing. You don't even really know what the strengths are. Again, it's really more about, I don't really like these characters so much, or I don't really want to, fight these strategies. It's, again, more for variety and fun rather than like super duper competitive, which that is that not necessarily a problem, but that is a con, right? It is not as like in depth, at least in competitive, but whenever is it ever going to be in depth, right? Whenever is anyone going to come to a consensus when there's just 5 random people who all think about the game differently? So I think that you shouldn't really lean into that. It's hard to have team play and like super good team play with random people you don't know very well at all, because it's, competitive. So I don't think you should necessarily go into that too hard. So that's kind of my system. I think it's a good idea in theory, but I do want to hear back from you guys. Like, how would you improve it? How would you change it? Stuff like that, because there's probably some tweaks and everything. Maybe the number could go up. Maybe you just kind of get rid of the role restriction and it's just like the top 3 out of any of them go away. That could be something, right? But yeah, I think hero bans are becoming a more and more interesting discussion as we go on, and I feel like we are going to see some kind of hero ban experiment in the future. So be prepared. I think you may be seeing hero bans a little more than you might think in the future. But with that, it's going to do it for me. This was Stream Live, twitch.tv/Layton Hemingway. I do these Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. This is also on YouTube. Be sure to do all that good, like, comment, subscribe. I do really appreciate it. And if you want to talk Overwatch or send me any hot takes or anything like that, feel free to join my Discord. It is down in the description below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a good day.